What has the tour been like, and are Australians reacting to the post-COVID hangover differently from the Brits, for example?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, well, first and foremost, the tour so far has been very successful. I mean, essentially sold out in every venue across a number of cities: Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, Adelaide, and now I'm in Brisbane before going on to Perth. And the warmth, certainly towards me, has been extraordinary. I've engaged with politicians in the Australian Parliament. We've had a couple of mainstream media hits. Outsiders interview I did last Sunday, has got well over 1.5 million views. The Canberra Weekly did a very supportive, strong article supporting, or at least putting the case forward that what I'm saying, that this vaccine should never have been approved for a single human in the first place. And that's already getting close to 2 million views. That's just on Twitter. I suspect it's a lot more than that. So for me, that's a good sign. People are interested. It's breaking through the mainstream. I had a phone call from your former president of the Australian Medical Association, Professor Karen Phelps, who had read the Canberra Weekly article. And I thought she was calling me up to say, maybe to criticize maybe some of the stuff I was saying, maybe it was too strong. And she said, no, it's brilliant. Keep going. We have the Australian of the Year 2020, James Mukey, Dr. James Mukey, who's an ophthalmologist. He came to my talk in Adelaide yesterday. He's fully vaxxed. He came with an open mind. And by the end of it, I would say he was fully turned. I mean, he was really congratulatory in terms of what the evidence I'd presented. So these are all good signs, Alexander. I think we're reaching a tipping point here in Australia in terms of the greater truth being disseminated to the public. And I think that, hopefully we'll see changes happen very quickly. But one of the first things we need to do is completely suspend any use of these COVID mRNA vaccines, because they're not doing any good right now, very little good at best. And they are certainly causing harm. And unfortunately, in some cases, that means death. So this needs to stop immediately.
Well, I actually was one of those select few who didn't have any of the vaccines, and so I followed the narrative obviously very closely from my prison cell home, where I was confined for months and months on end. But I do remember Karen Phelps coming forward as one of the first high-profile prior supporters of the vaccine, and boy, did she get wiped out on social media by all of the mainly left, who were saying, how dare you come out and say or dissent from the narrative. It was quite a thing. But you've had some choice things yourself to say about the Therapeutic Goods and Drugs Administration regarding the reality that almost entirely, the institution's entirely funded by the pharmaceutical companies, I think it's about 97%, whose goods they are tasked with evaluating. Now, the TGA maintain that this doesn't impact their judgment, although they have certainly made serious mistakes in the past. But I'm curious, was there a difference in response from health regulators around the world who were not significantly funded by Big Pharma, or did everyone seem to give a universal green light of faith to COVID vaccines?
Well, in general, no, Alexander, pretty much every regulator went along and approved these vaccines. I think some countries maybe acted a bit earlier, like Denmark, in terms of suspending the vaccines for younger people, for example. But it's been pretty consistent across the board, and most of the funding, certainly of the major regulators around the world, comes from pharma. And that's, again, a symptom of their increasing power over decision-making when it comes to our health, which has increased over a few decades. So, I think the worst, or what would you say, the one that tops a lot in the world is the TGA. 96% of its funding comes from pharma, and that's a big problem. It's a big conflict of interest. And although they may want to believe themselves that they are acting independently, I don't think anyone with any objectivity can say that is likely to be true.
I just find it so unusual that normally you see some kind of diversity when a new drug comes to market. For every regulator to just green light this in is a strange kind of situation to find ourselves in. Even between countries, when a new drug hits the market, we often see one country reject it, one send it back for further study. Why do you think there was this sudden outbreak of a cult-like consensus when it came to COVID vaccines and nothing else?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think speaking to people, certainly in health policy, and people who are well-intentioned, I think we have to not forget and have some maybe compassion, I would say, and empathy for, it's not easy, for these people, because I think a lot of it was grounded in fear and groupthink. You know, there was a huge exaggerated fear amongst many people, and still exists, around the threat of COVID. And that drove a lot of this decision making, even at policy level. And I suspect that's probably what's driven a lot of this.